Welcome to part 4, The Power of Choral Reading. I'm so excited for this training. It's one of the more enjoyable, engaging activities that you can do with your students when it comes to reading fluency. You will be surprised at how much they love it, even older students or, more reluctant students, which we all have a few of those, right? So let's go ahead and get started. What is choral reading? Well, choral reading is a form of community reading that involves multiple readers reading the same text orally. Group reading can be done with multiple types of text, but poems are perhaps the most popular medium to use. So why choral reading? What are the benefits of choral reading? Choral reading is a wonderful way to build community in the classroom because students are reading together. Choral reading also provides support to those students who are less fluent readers. It's not intimidating. So because choral reading is done cooperatively, it removes the intimidating aspect associated with students reading aloud on their own. It is also non-intimidating because students never have to read an unfamiliar text aloud. They are given the opportunity to read and practice the text first, always. And then choral reading is essentially a performance that students are eager to practice and perfect, which means they're motivated to practice reading the text. This element of performance increases engagement and motivates students. Choral reading works for almost all ages and grade levels. However, many upper grade or middle school teachers might think it's not appropriate for older students. This is simply not true. As long as you differentiate the text, even your older, and as I said before, more reluctant students will enjoy and benefit from choral reading. In fact, a study showed some very promising results. In this study, whole class choral reading was conducted daily in a 6th grade language arts setting of 112 students. And the results showed significant improvement in both phonological decoding and oral reading fluency skills. So let's discuss what type of texts you should use for choral reading. The one thing I will say is there's a lot of latitude or flexibility here. Almost any text is appropriate for choral reading, which is important because we want students reading a variety of texts, especially our students who are struggling with reading fluency. But I'm going to give you a few guidelines just to kind of keep in mind as you choose text for choral reading. Shorter text with rhythmic qualities and distinct parts. So poems, song lyrics, things like that. Excerpts from content area textbooks. This is huge. Science and social studies textbooks. You can absolutely use a section in a lesson within these books for choral reading. And then short stories are fabulous, and also just a chapter or a part or an excerpt of a novel can be used as well. So if you have a favorite novel or your students have a favorite novel, you can even have them select a section of that novel that they really found interesting or that they particularly enjoyed, and they can use that for choral reading. Now, just to be clear, for this training, you will be receiving detailed lesson plans that include over 50 poems. So just as with our previous trainings, you'll check your email after this video concludes, and it should be sitting there in your inbox. And also, these materials are leveled, so no matter what grade you teach, you'll have everything you need. So we're just going to get started. I'm going to show you 10 different ways to conduct choral reading. There's so many different variations, which is nice because the variety really keeps students engaged and makes it a little bit more interesting. So the first type of choral reading that we're going to discuss is unison choral reading. And it's the most common form of group reading. As its name explains, all the students read every line of a text in unison. So this is a great option to use when you're beginning choral reading with your students. It's also an excellent option to help more reserved, less confident readers become comfortable with reading aloud. And students get instant auditory feedback when they hear their peers reading aloud as they read aloud too. It's a highly effective way for readers to match the pitch and intonation of the group, which, as you know from our previous trainings, is an important aspect. Both of those, pitch and intonation, are important aspects of prosody. And then number 2 is chime-in choral reading. So for chime-in choral reading, one student reads specific parts of the text independently while the whole group chimes in during certain points, usually key phrases or verses. So students usually will chime in when they want to emphasize something that's important. All students will take turns. So this is important. If you're going to do chime in, you really want to allow all students to take turns with the independent reading role. So the one student that's reading independently, that should rotate. That role should rotate because this will help keep all students engaged and it provides more intentional practice. Now, I never require a student to read independently aloud if he or she does not want to. Also, of course, never require or ask a student to read aloud on with a piece of text that's very unfamiliar or completely new to them as well. So just keep that in mind. If you do have students who are reluctant and they don't want to assume the independent role of reading aloud, just give them some time, especially the more you do choral reading and the more they see their peers reading independently aloud in front of others, their confidence will build, and you'll be surprised at how many will actually start requesting the independent role for this type of choral reading. And type 3 is build-up choral reading. So with build-up choral reading, the number of readers increases or decreases as the text progresses. So one student starts reading, the others join in at designated sections. And these are usually predetermined lines or phrases of the text. Build-up choral reading requires students to pay attention to the entire text and not just their assigned sections. The change of reading volume as more readers join in also adds an interesting sound quality to the activity that students really enjoy. Next, we have type 4, solo choral reading. With solo choral reading, one student will read specific lines, stanzas, or verses alone. Initially, your more confident readers will volunteer to be the solo reader. However, after practice and repetition of the same text, less confident or struggling readers will volunteer as well. And then the bold text indicates what is supposed to be read solely. So in your lesson plans that you'll get, you're going to have poems that you can use, leveled poems. And what we did is we bolded the text that are the solo parts. So your students will know exactly which parts are for the solo reader. Type 5 is called callback choral reading. For callback choral reading, place readers in two groups. One group reads their lines and the other group responds with the lines that follow. So this back and forth arrangement allows students to practice a text while maintaining consistent rhythm and smoothness. Then we have 6, concurrent choral reading. And with concurrent choral reading, students will be reading simultaneously. So you'll divide students into 2 groups. One group reads the poem while the other group rhythmically chants a line from the poem or a line related to the poem. Concurrent reading creates an interesting sound that students enjoy, similar to singing a song in staggered rounds. So again, you are getting lesson plans, detailed lesson plans that explain exactly how concurrent choral reading works, and then also the materials. So when you read the lesson plans, it'll make perfect sense on how you'll do this. Type 7 is solo together choral reading. So you'll divide students into small groups. The group size will vary depending on the length of poems used. Each student in the group has assigned lines to read independently, solo, and then the bold type lines are read by the entire group together. So when you see the poems, there are, I believe, 5 poems that we've provided for this type of choral reading. You will see the bold text, which indicates to students that that is what should be read together. Number 8 is random choral reading. So for this arrangement, students can choose the lines they want to read, or the lines of the poems can be numbered 1 through 6, and a die can be used to assign the lines. Whatever method is used to match readers with lines, the groups just need to make sure that all lines have at least one member reading them. And then, of course, the poems that we provided for this type of choral reading, the lines are numbered in the poems to allow for easy assignment. Number 9 is echo choral reading. For echo reading, the teacher or one student reads a line and the class or another group reads the same line back. So students who are echoing must read the line exactly as the reader did, matching pitch, rhythm, and expression. So there's twofold benefit here. You have the reader or the initial reader reading it, and then you have people echoing it back. So the echoers, we'll call them, they get to practice mimicking the reader's intonation and pitch and expression. And then the reader actually gets to hear back their own pitch, rhythm, and intonation. And then lastly, we have reversed echo choral reading. For reverse echo choral reading, the class or group reads a line and the teacher or a student reads the same line back, matching pitch, rhythm, and expression. Students should vary volume, intonation, and phrasing. And again, the lesson plans you're going to get for these types of choral readings are very explicit. In fact, once we conclude this training, you will see these lesson plans in your inbox. And so there's detailed descriptions. It tells you what materials you'll use. And of course, we provide you all of those materials. And then I even added modifications and extensions so that while you do have 10 different types of choral reading, each one can be changed, modified, extended to meet the needs of your students and to also add interest. So up next, our last video of the series is part 5. It's a super important one. It's the most essential component, repeated reading. I cannot wait to see you in the training.